God, our strength and our hope. Amen. There's a sign out front here, out in front of the church. It's one of those great signs where you can change the lettering and stuff so you can put messages on it. And today it says, y'all walk past it. It says, you are both blessed and blessing. You are both blessed and blessing. They were just hesitating for those of you who aren't actually here in person because they didn't want you to feel left out. It says, for you are both blessed and blessing. Kind of the point, isn't it, of the Beatitudes? That you are blessed, just as you are, in all of these ways. But with that blessing, you do something with it. That's what the other 3 days of the Sermon on the Mount are about, I guess. But that's kind of the point. You know, from the very beginning of talking, well, actually, I was going to say the beginning of talking about the Beatitudes, but this goes back more than a few weeks because earlier, before Lent, we had stories from the Sermon on the Mount as well. And so for quite some time now, I've been talking about this whole Sermon on the Mount thing and how I think it went, right? So I'm just going to repeat myself for a second because it's important. I tried to come to the Sermon on the Mount with this particular perspective, which was that I tried to imagine how things went that day for Jesus. And I imagined that he came out and he saw the crowd. I don't know how big the crowd was, but he saw the crowd and he looked at the people and he looked at their faces. And the very first thing he said was, you are blessed. Just as you are blessed. And he saw people in the crowd who were poor in spirit, and he saw people who were grieving. He saw people, he just saw them, and he went up to them. I think he kind of went up to them, and he just took them and said, you are blessed. Follow me around the room, Damien. I'm going to do that. I'm just kidding. Don't follow me around the room. We won't be able to get it. We won't be able to see everybody. But I think that's what Jesus did. Imagine a sermon that went like that. You should prepare yourself for that, Damien. And Graham, you should prepare yourself too. Because one day I'm going to do that. You all should prepare yourself. And you won't know when it's going to happen. The crowd didn't either. Right? Even the ones who had heard about Jesus, and that's why they were there in the first place. Maybe they were there because they thought he might heal them or he might do a miracle. You know, apparently this Jesus guy puts on a good show. They might have been there because they wanted to hear what he had to say. For whatever reason that they were there, Jesus came out and he saw them, and instead of just talking at them or doing like healing people, and he started with, you are blessed. And I think he started by, like, he saw people in the crowd and he'd look them right in the eye and say, I see that this is how you are right now. And I want you to know you're blessed. And as he moved through the crowd, and in fact, I think the ones that we have that are written down, those Beatitudes, 8 to 10, depending on how you count them, I think there was probably many, many more. And the person who was recording this story just finally went, you know, that's a lot. No one's going to read this. Mind you, isn't Matthew's gospel the one that begins with that whole long ancestry of Jesus thing? Nobody really wants to read that either. And yet there it is. So I think we could have heard more here. I wonder why they didn't include them all. You know, it's one thing to say, I think Jesus kind of worked his way through the crowd. And as he traveled through the crowd, he'd walk up to people and he'd hold them and he'd say, you are blessed. And I really want you to hear you are blessed. Just like Jesus really wanted them to know. That's why he did it. He really wanted them to know. You can say all lives are blessed all you want. But it's another thing entirely to say to someone just as they are, you are blessed. And I think Jesus wanted to do that. So you know, however you are, You are blessed. But he did it in a crowd. And so as he moved through the crowd, people having heard that they are blessed just as they are, then heard how other people are blessed just as they are. And we're human beings. And so I imagine that by the time Jesus got to the pure in heart, and then that kind of escalated to those who are so strong in spirit that the fact that they live as God intended and follow the teaching of Jesus, that they are in fact persecuted for it. I imagine some of those people who were earlier on in the conversation were kind of going, I imagine some of them thought, I'm going to talk to that person because I really need to know. I need to know more. I want to be that. I imagine some of them thought, well, who are they? Because we're human beings. I imagine there was even some people in the crowd that day who thought, right, I'll just take those names down and pass them on to the Roman authorities because just like this Jesus guy, they're going to be trouble. In other words, I imagine that everyone responded just as Jesus intended to offer in their own unique way, right? Because we're like that. And we all heard it. I want to imagine that very much like we want to imagine all of the stories of Jesus, that everyone was happy with what he had to say. But we know they weren't. We know they weren't because we know there are stories. We know there are stories about that. We also know how the story ends. And we're coming up to that piece of the story. We're coming up to that piece of the story where people turned on Jesus very quickly over the week. It's not enough to just hear, oh, I am blessed. We must share the blessing and live that into the world. Jesus is going to go on in the Sermon on the Mount and talk about how we are salt and light. And he's going to teach about the law and living what's at the heart of the law. And he's going to teach about prayer. He's going to teach about a lot of things. But he began with, you are blessed. And he began with the people who are the poorest in spirit, the people who are the weakest. And eventually got to those who are the strongest. And both of those will find themselves in the kingdom of heaven. I think everybody in between does too, to be honest with you. I think Jesus was just trying to be a little bit more specific about some of those things. He didn't want to just kind of go, we're all going there, so, hang on though. I don't think he actually even meant to say that either. Because it's the same Jesus, right, who's reminding people that the kingdom of heaven is near. It's this close. Do you know why it's this close? Because it's you. It's in you. You can make the kingdom of heaven come here. That's the point of Jesus teaching that. In fact, and this is why I read from the First Nations edition of the New Testament. This is a very recent translation that comes actually from, I've talked about it a little bit before, but it comes from indigenous communities in the States who chose to call it the First Nations edition, by the way, because that's a Canadian thing and they loved it. Just acknowledging that that was a Canadian thing. But the language in it is so, one of the things I like most about it, the language is so remarkably relational. And not just about our relationship with each other or with God, but our relationship with creation. Right? Creation is part of the story. Of course it is. The story's not about us. It's about all of creation. And so the language around our connectedness to creation is really important. And so I'm sure you caught this. In the New Revised Standard Edition, updated edition, have I covered all of that? I think that's what we call it now. The latest edition, heaven, the kingdom of heaven. And in the First Nations edition, they call it the good road. I think that's important. Because I think, and even the crowd hearing that from Jesus that day, hearing heaven, they're thinking next life. It's how we get there. But it's not. It's not a destination, it's the journey. That's why the kingdom of heaven is this close. That's why it's near. Here, even, is because it's the journey. It's not where we're going. We can make it be part of the journey. I love that language of the good road, because it also connects not just with creation and walking and action and life and movement and everything. It also connects with good. The creation story, right? Everything is good in the beginning. It changed. We have a story about that. This is a story for another time. But in the beginning, it was good. And so those who walk as if heaven is here are the ones who walk the good road, the ones who walk with Jesus. I love that imagery. Because truly, we will not begin to even think that it's possible for heaven to be here if we don't understand that it is part of the journey and that that journey is good, meant to be good. We struggle with that. We struggle with that a lot. And we struggle with that sometimes because we feel weak in spirit. We struggle with it sometimes because we feel very strong in spirit and we feel like we're actually traveling the good road, and yet people don't seem to want us to travel the good road. I suspect that the crowd that heard Jesus say for the first time, "Blessed are you who seek the right path, who walk the right path, who follow in my way, for you will be persecuted." I suspect they heard that quite differently than we would hear the word persecuted right now. Especially, let me say that slightly differently, us. There are places in the world where people understand what the word persecuted truly means. I think that's harder for us, because the manner in which we live tends to make us think sometimes that nobody's persecuted. Oh, yes, they are. I'll tell you right now who's not persecuted. That's a shorter answer. You and me. Christians, generally, are the ones who are least persecuted. I'll tell you who is persecuted. Drag queens. I bet they feel persecuted. People in the LGBTQ community. I bet they feel persecuted. I bet people who are of color, black people, feel persecuted at times. I think we find it harder to understand that. I'm not going to say that there aren't people amongst the Christian communities in North America who feel that they're persecuted. There certainly are some. I would want to ask them this question, though. What is it that you feel persecuted for? And is that truly that you are being persecuted for your beliefs, or is it that your beliefs are being challenged because not all Christians are followers of Jesus? I'm trying to think of a really good way of saying this. But we struggle with that, don't we? We do struggle with that. We struggle with both what we might understand as how we might persecute someone, but also how we might also feel persecuted. It's tricky. It's tricky. I would suggest the good road is a way to understanding that. The good road is a path that is life-giving and loving. The good road is a path that follows the love of God into the world. It's creative. It's grace-filled. It's compassionate. It's loving. It honors who we truly are, and that is inherently good because we are of God. Right? Earlier, and this is why again it's so easy to say we are all walking the good path. Jesus could very easily have said, all lives are blessed. You're all going to heaven. But he didn't, because again, he wanted to connect with the uniqueness of where everyone was and remind you that wherever you are in your life, you are blessed. But the thing that puts us on the good road, and don't we step off it a lot, are those very things that he honors in those blessings: mercy, grace, compassion. They are the things of love that is of God, of the divine spirit that is in us. We are of God and the earth. That's the good road. The good road is when we most connect with that. And I talked earlier when I was talking about the pure in heart. I think that one of the ways that Jesus understood them saying the pure in heart wasn't about how we might judge with ethics and morality and all that kind of structures of society and everything. I think it's about being open to God's Spirit. And those who are most open to God's Spirit are, of course, the pure in heart. Because why? Because they've connected with the divine Spirit that is in us. They've connected with the goodness. Those who follow the way of Jesus have as well. Those who walk the good path. It's sometimes really hard to stay on the good path. Sometimes it's because we make choices that take us off the good path. Sometimes it's because we can feel pushed off the good path. Jesus doesn't expect us to step perfectly every time. That's the point of the life of Jesus, isn't it? To show us how we can make our way without the judgment of whenever we make a mistake. It's an interesting thing about persecution, isn't it? That people are persecuted on the basis of somebody making a judgment about them and putting that judgment into action. Wouldn't it be amazing if we put all of our judgments into action with love? Actually, it'd be really amazing if we didn't judge, but we're human beings. But wouldn't it be amazing if the action that we put behind every judgment, every thought about others, was just a step on the good road? Wanting to hear others' stories, wanting to support them in being who they are, in finding their way too, particularly if we feel good about the steps we've taken on our own road. Wouldn't it be great if we could just, wouldn't it be just great if we could live into the love which is within us? Because that would be the good road. And that truly is what it is. Every moment in time turns into the next moment in time. We are in motion in our lives. Again, heaven isn't a destination, it's the journey. That's the point of the good road. I think that's the point of Jesus starting with blessing, is to remind everyone that that's the first step. The first step on the good road is to know how blessed we are, just to be who we are, however we find ourselves. And if we can share that blessing with other people and assure each other that we are blessed and support each other in our blessing, we all journey together. I don't think Jesus ever had the intention. It's a shame sometimes that we leave stories hanging. Wouldn't it have been great if we'd had more of this story about what happened after the Sermon on the Mount, or what happened in the context of Jesus saying these things? When he'd say something. And imagine how great it would be if we could hear what Jesus said at this moment when he's talking about those who were so strong in spirit that they might be persecuted for it, and somebody challenged him on that and said, hey, but wait, what about me? We don't have that. And yet we do. We do. Because I think you can imagine how Jesus would have replied to that. You can imagine from the life of Jesus the grace and the love and loving way in which he would have handled that. And we might want to remember that the next time we are challenged like that. That perhaps part of knowing we are blessed and sharing our blessing with others is to offer love and grace to others when we are challenged. Oh, that's going to be hard work.